Julie Lynn Seay was a 25-year-old from Daytona Beach, Florida. She was a mother of two and had recently gotten divorced. On December 23, 1988, Julie was at her job. She mentioned she planned to do some Christmas shopping later that evening. Julie departed her work at the usual time. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. We know the type. The guy who pulls up to the valet in his Ferrari. He gets out wearing a tuxedo. Maybe it's Armani or Tom Ford. He's alone and he catches everyone else's attention as he walks inside the building. He smiles. He's friendly. But no one knows his name. He's not an actor. He's not a pro athlete. He's not even a famous musician. But he looks like someone. Then in a second, he's through the front door, and everybody else is left to wonder, who the heck was that guy? Have you ever been in that situation, where you're somewhere, you see someone, man or woman, and you're like, that person looks like someone? I had that happen to me a few years ago at the Tampa airport. There was this beautiful woman, I'd say she was in her late 30s or 40s. She was getting on a different plane than mine. I was like, I know she's someone, but I can't place her. Then she was gone on a jet, and she's still an enigma. I bring this up because 31 years later, the people around Julie Seay still have a conundrum of their own. Julie, in the days leading up to her disappearance, had been complaining about a guy harassing her. But Julie never mentioned his name despite her complaints. Not to her family, not to her friends. And shortly after this, she was gone. And even now, nobody is sure who the mystery man is. Or maybe we are. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's website, charlieproject.org. Julie Seay was adopted out of an orphanage and raised in a large, happy family. She was intelligent and a bit shy, but she'd really open up once she got to know people. She met her husband Tim at church, and they had 2 children. They lived in the beautiful Atlantic Coast community and NASCAR hub, Daytona Beach, Florida. What could go wrong? But then the problems started. Their marriage fell apart after 6 years, and they got divorced the same year she disappeared. In addition, after moving in with 2 female friends, Julie started to complain about a man who wouldn't leave her alone. Yet she never uttered his name to anyone. So on December 23, 1988, it was a Friday. Julie went to work. She was a telemarketing salesperson. She then planned to get some last-minute Christmas shopping done. Julie may have gone home first before a shopping trip, but no one is quite sure. Either way, after leaving her job, Julie was never seen again. Bank records retrieved later show Julie went to an ATM that evening, although the location has never been established. Despite Julie never mentioning her tormentor's name back in 1988, the police eventually decided upon who that man might have been. But there is no proof the police are correct. We will name this man in this episode. However, questions remain. Number 1, if Julie was set on going shopping, how could she and this man run into each other? Number 2, if this man is responsible, why was Julie's car found nowhere near where he lived? And number 3, could this man be responsible for other disappearances and murders of women in the Daytona Beach area? Julie's family is 100% convinced this person of interest is responsible for her disappearance. However, right now he's a free man. For this episode, I welcome back to the program the sister-in-law of Julie Seay, Leslie Martin. Unfound News. Did you get your newsletter? I hope you did. It came out last Thursday, August 1st, my birthday. If you didn't get it, contact me and I will put you on the list. I think it's worth it because I write about some topics there that I don't cover on the episodes or on the YouTube live show. I would love for you to be a member, and I promise, no spam. Next, this is a topic I mention in the newsletters, but not so much elsewhere. But here at Unfound, we do our share of investigations as well, meaning we work on cases that may or may not become episodes. I'm working on something behind the scenes right now. Cherie is, and so is Dr. Eric Grabowski. All different cases in different states, trying to dig up information that the public's never seen before. I will keep you posted if anything breaks open. And finally, I have to apologize to all the think tankers this week. Once again, YouTube has changed its criteria for live streaming. I think we may just be conducting the think tank on Facebook from now on. But the live show will remain on YouTube. And if you'd like to be a think tanker, just go to Patreon and contribute at the $12 a month level. Thanks. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, and Facebook. On Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us on YouTube for the Unfound live show. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound podcast. This week, I need to thank Murray. You can also contribute at PayPal, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. This week, I need to thank Tobias. That is also the email address. Merchandise, the books at Amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Don't forget the reviews. Shirts at unfound-podcast.myshopify.com. Cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/unfound podcast. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thanks. I'm so happy to have back on Unfound the sister-in-law of Julie Seay, Leslie Martin. Leslie, welcome back to Unfound.
Thank you.
Of course, the first time around, we talked about your stepson Donnie and his disappearance. That is a disappearance that is much more recent than Julie's. There are things that are still developing in that case. But in this case with Julie, she is your sister-in-law. So why don't you talk about first how she and your brother met, and maybe talk a little bit about what you remember about their relationship.
I believe, if I am not mistaken, they met at church back then. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that is how they met.
Okay.
And, excuse me, I met Julie at a family dinner, I believe. Oh, it's been so long ago. I believe we were at the Islander outside of Daytona Beach, the Islander Hotel with my family that night. And she was really, really quiet and shy, young. I think she was only about 18 then.
Wow.
And just super shy. And we were always just sort of loud people.
Okay.
So no doubt, I know what she thought of me. I asked her later, I said, what did you think of us when you first met us? And she goes, everybody was really nice. And she had this mischievous grin. And my little great nephew has that same face. She said, I thought you were a floozy because you had dangly earrings on.
Oh my. Okay.
I mean, she could be so funny. And as she was around us more, her personality came out more. And she was just an awesome, very sweet, very giving person.
And so she was 18 when she met your brother, like you said, at church in the Daytona Beach area. And how old was he?
I believe he was 20, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, so both very young. Both of them very young. Okay. And it sounds to me like you said that she was very quiet. Maybe your brother not so much. You know, what do you think, if you can say, I know that you're close to your brother, you know, what drew them to each other? What was the commonality?
Do attract sometimes. And, but, you know, as time went on, Julie was not really shy. I think that was just meeting us for the first time, probably jitters. That's always a little nerve-wracking when you meet the family. And she ended up not being shy at all. And got to work with her in Orlando for a while, and she was far from shy as time went on. The whole family just loved her to pieces.
Mm-hmm. And you do not live in the Daytona Beach area now. We're not going to get into where you live now, but so you were living in the area, so you got to see her quite often, or how was that?
Back then I did, and then I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and that's where I was living when Julie disappeared.
Oh, okay. Okay, and so would you say that you and Julie became close even though you moved? Did you talk to her, very often? Obviously,
Yes,
she's
we
then
talked
your
on the phone.
sister-in-law. You did?
We
Okay.
talked on the phone, and she came and visited once, and uh, just she was my first sister. My other brother wasn't married yet, and
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with boys, so it was really cool having a sister.
Okay. And how often would you say that you saw her? Did they come up and visit you, or did you just get together for
Once we moved,
holidays, or what? Not so
not so
often.
often because they did separate while we were there. I saw her when I left there and would go visit, but they didn't get to come up so often because they both worked too. And
Okay.
I at the time was pregnant with my youngest, so it
Right.
was a little easier. Toward the end, I couldn't go anywhere at all,
Mm-hmm.
and they had separated, so things kind
Okay.
of changed. But we did speak on the phone after that, even.
Okay, well, let's talk about their separation and divorce. And we're not here to dig up things from 30 years ago.
Right.
But they did have. How long were they married before they got divorced? Maybe you can talk a little bit about their children too.
I believe for about 5 or 6 years, if I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
and then they separated, got divorced, and the divorce had not been final that long before Julie disappeared.
Hmm. Okay. And they did have some children, though.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
They were quite young at the time.
Right. Of course, if they had only been married 6 years, then they were
Right.
quite young. How many kids?
Two.
Two. Okay. So they got married. Sounds like very young, 18 and 20 years old when they got together. Of course, Julie was 25 when she disappeared, and she had already been divorced at that time. So, 7 years, 7 years from them meeting till she disappeared. But what was she? Once she got divorced, was she working? Was she?
She was
Did she,
working.
did she have custody of the kids? What did they work out with that? If you can say, and was she living had roommates, etc.? What
My
was going on
brother
in her
had
life?
them most of the time. At that point, because Julie was working, and it was at the time my mom was still alive, and she was helping with the boys quite a bit, and
Mm.
was close by. So at the time, Timmy had them, more often than Julie did.
All right, and Tim is your
And
brother.
right,
Okay.
and but she still, she saw the kids and all. It certainly wasn't that she did not want the children or anything
Mm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she was supposed to come that Christmas that she disappeared. She was supposed to come to Birmingham with everybody.
Okay. So they get divorced, and Tim, your brother, and the kids are still living in the Daytona Beach area as well,
They were actually in Orlando at the time,
in Orlando. Okay, so she's Daytona Beach,
which is not
Orlando.
far from Daytona at all. Yeah.
Not far. Hour and 15 minutes, of course, depending on traffic and other factors. But yeah,
Right.
yes, I've made that drive a few times. All right. So was she living by herself at the time?
She
What
had
was
roommates. She had two roommates.
okay. I think this is going to play a little bit of a part in the disappearance and how we look at it. But what was her job? Is that a job that she had for a while? What was she doing?
She was doing some kind of telephone sales at the time when she disappeared.
Okay. And had she been doing that for a while or just since she got
Not for a
divorced?
long while, no.
No. Okay. And in your opinion, looking back at it now, of course, over 30 years later, how do you think that she handled the divorce. Did she and your brother remain friends? Were they cordial with the kids?
They
What
were
can you say about that?
actually planning on, yeah, they were planning on getting back together. I'm sure
Hmm.
I can't speak for either one of them, what they
Mm-hmm.
went through. No divorce is easy,
No.
and I'm sure that there were things involved that probably weren't that great, but they were planning on getting back together. I had spoken with her on the phone about that, and I believe
Hmm.
just wanting to take it slow and work through whatever was going on with the two of them, and that's where it was left when she disappeared.
Okay. And so when you say that they were, trying or thinking, is that something that both of them said? Your brother at
My
the
brother
time,
did too. Yeah, my brother did too.
they were both saying that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. Of course, with kids like that, sometimes, people figure out they make mistakes after divorce, and I know some people that have gotten divorced and then got remarried. So, it does happen. That's not
Right.
unusual. But she was living. She has a couple roommates, and I know we've talked about their names. I think you said one of the names was Michelle. They were both girls or both young women.
Right. Right.
Okay. Now, something that we need to talk about, and we need to be, I think, fairly specific about this, is that in the days and weeks, and you talking to Julie, I don't know if she was, we probably can cover that, whether she was mentioning this to any other people, but you were very close to her, even though you didn't live in the area. She was telling you about a guy who was bothering her. What can you say about
Right.
that? What was she saying about that? And specifically, did she ever use the guy's name, or did she just say some guy? What can you tell the listeners?
She said some guy. She did not say his name. She said a guy at work. If she had been talking to me in nowadays, I'm sure she probably would have used the word stalk.
Mm,
Uh, she
mm-hmm.
said that he just wouldn't leave her alone, and he was
Hmm.
driving her crazy. She did not tell me that she had ever gone out with him before or anything during the
Mm,
actual separation or divorce. I don't have a lot of information on that.
mm-hmm.
I believe they may have, and she just did not care for him. And when she called me a couple of days before Christmas, she called to say that she was not going to be able to come because of work. And I was going to, if I didn't, my due date was Christmas Day. If I did not have my son on Christmas Day, they were going to induce me on the 27th.
Okay.
And I told her that, well, darn, you'll miss, they're going to induce labor on the 27th if I don't go into labor before then, which I did have him on Christmas Day, his due date.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was disappointed she wasn't going to be there.
Mm.
And that was our last conversation.
Okay, just so I can ask you, she never said this guy's name, and we're going to talk about who that might have been. But did she ever say it's a
Right.
guy that she works with, or was it a guy in her apartment complex, or a guy at the
The guy
gym?
she worked with.
A guy
The
she
guy
worked with.
she worked with.
All right,
Right.
so at this job where she was a salesperson on the phone.
Correct.
Okay. And did she ever say anything about going maybe to her supervisors? If maybe he was her supervisor, be even above him to complain. Any knowledge
No, she
as to
didn't
that?
go into detail like that, and I don't know that she ever did. I'm sure that the Daytona PD would hopefully have that information.
Okay. Okay. And did she say he was just kind of bothering? The way you remember it, ever express any fear?
Not fear, just frustration. Like
Frustration.
I can't get this guy to leave me alone,
Okay.
so that
All
he
right.
was relentless.
Okay. So she never said anything about he just, for example, just happened to show up at her apartment unannounced.
No,
Any
she didn't go into specifics.
didn't go into specifics. Okay. So can you think of anything else going back to that time? Anything else that she was complaining about, worried about, anything else in her life that could be related to her disappearance, the way you look at it
Not at
now?
all. Nothing. Nothing.
All right. No, I just have to ask because it pops up. And any drugs, any questionable behavior, risky behavior that you know of?
No, no.
Zero. Okay. Well, let's go move up to December 23rd, 1998. She's working this job. She has roommates. What do you know? What have you found out? The facts of that day, where she went, what she did.
The detective, there was a detective on the case for quite a while. He's not anymore. He has since retired, Detective Adamy,
Okay.
and he was really helped a whole lot in us trying to figure out things by being as honest as he could. He said that Julie had worked that day, and she had told people she was going to go shopping, that
Okay.
she still had gifts to get for the boys. I think she may have gone home first. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
I think she did. It was either people at work or in her apartment, excuse me, that were able to give a description of what she was wearing that day.
Okay.
And that's all we know is there's never been anything said about any gifts being found in the car. When they did find the car, I don't want to jump ahead of you,
Okay.
or anything like that. In fact, her person, everything was still in the car.
Okay. Okay. So as far as you know, it was just December 23rd was a Friday, correct?
Yes,
It
yes.
was Friday, and so December 25th, 1988 was on a Sunday. Of course, this is the birth date of one of your children,
Hmm.
correct? Okay. So you were in the final stages of your pregnancy, so you're kind of laid up at the time.
I actually went to the hospital late Christmas Eve night
Okay.
and had him on Christmas Day.
Okay. So
So
she
we knew
goes.
nothing about Julie until my brother tried calling on Christmas morning.
Okay, and I want to talk about that here in a moment. So she goes to work on that Friday like she usually does. And then we're just not sure. I think that we're leaning toward the idea that she maybe did go home first and then went back out. But the way the police describe it, and maybe the way the other people who knew her thought that she was going to be getting some last minute shopping done.
Right.
Okay. And then sometime in all of that, of course, she disappears. You just mentioned it, and we will talk about it now. When was the first time that somebody started thinking that, maybe something's up here? Maybe Julie is missing or she's not, what was it?
I'm not real sure. My brother came up to the hospital. They didn't say anything earlier that day, but he came up late Christmas night, and he was really concerned.
Mm,
That's when I found out. Even though my mom and him knew, that's when I found out they had not been able to get a hold of her. And I don't remember if he spoke with any of her roommates at that point and if they hadn't seen her. But on Monday, the day after, I wasn't going to get to come home until Tuesday.
hmm
Uh, on Monday, my brother and him had made the decision to go back. My mom was actually going to stay for a couple of weeks with me.
Okay.
And they made the decision to go back and go to Daytona so they could file an official missing persons report.
Okay. So she disappears on a Friday, the 23rd, and then so you're saying the Monday, the 26th, is when they decide, you know what? People haven't seen her. We've tried calling her. She's not picking up. It feels like something is up. Something's
Right.
going on. Okay. So the way you understand it, and I understand that you, of course, had just given birth, you're not going to be able to take part in these things, but the way you understand it,
Right.
when they got back down to Daytona Beach, what did they do? What was the interaction with the police like?
Uh, I'm afraid that the initial interaction with the police, and back then missing people's were quite different. than they are now.
Mm-hmm.
There were some things going on that there are now, like sex trafficking and whatever, but we didn't hear about them. We didn't have social media
Okay.
and all back then. But the way that it was treated at first was maybe she was despondent over not being with the little ones at Christmas, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe she was, upset about the divorce and she just took off. Uh, she wasn't despondent sounding when I spoke with her, disappointed that she wasn't going to be able to spend Christmas with us. That would have been the very first Christmas that
Mm-hmm.
that would have happened.
Yeah.
But she certainly was not acting despondent or anything.
No.
But I'm afraid that, that's how they took it then.
Hmm.
And it
Okay.
wasn't a matter of urgency initially.
Okay. So your brother goes down there. He files the police report, but the police are maybe not as
She'll be back in a few days. Maybe she took off and
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Okay. So they're not as responsive as you would have liked, as we would
At the
think,
beginning,
as
right?
we think they should have been. Just to make some things clear, that your brother, once again, her ex-husband, um, we're going to talk about him specifically, but the children were with him.
Right. In fact, he and my mom and the kids were on the way on the 23rd from Florida to Birmingham.
Okay. So I guess the plan was that she was not going to be able to spend Christmas with her children. I'm not trying
Right.
to put a spotlight on that, but was it because of your pregnancy? Is that the reason that was going to happen, or what do you think?
We all always did Christmas together anyway.
Okay.
And, my brother was bringing my mom to Birmingham so that she could stay with me,
Mm-hmm.
which that normally would not have happened. They probably would have gone home right after Christmas had I not been due any day. But my mom was going to stay and my brother and the boys go back.
Okay. So the plan was that he was just gonna. When do you think? I guess if she doesn't disappear, when do you think that she was going to get to see her children? Was it going to be on Christmas Day or the day after? What do you think the plan?
Probably a day or two after. I'm sure he would have probably hung around to see what was going to happen with me if I hadn't gone into labor.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
They left the day that I got out of the hospital, the 27th.
Okay. So that would have been a Tuesday. Okay. So, but I do have to ask, once this police report, I'm sure that being that your brother, well, just to be honest, is the ex-husband, and we know that ex-husbands often do play a role in their ex-wife's
Right.
disappearance. They did talk to him, but he had a pretty good alibi as to where he was when Julie disappeared. And what was that
Yes,
alibi?
he was with me and at my place of business and all over the mall with us shopping the day before. And
Okay.
I owned a restaurant and lounge back then, and he had gone with me to the state store because I couldn't pick up the cases of liquor. In Alabama, you have to go to a state store and purchase for your
Okay.
business, and he was with me when I did that, so he had very rock solid alibis.
Right, and we have to remember this is up in Birmingham, Alabama, which,
Right.
having just driven that from Florida up into Alabama, that is a long drive. A
Yes,
long,
it is.
long drive.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
It's not right down the street. Okay, so the
No.
police checked him out and ruled him out. Now, Julie, of course, is missing, but her car was missing, but it was eventually found. Where was it found? When was it found? What can you tell the listeners?
The car was found on Magnolia Avenue in Daytona, and as far as I know, the car was fine. The car was unlocked, and her purse was inside of the car, which had her birth certificate and some important papers in it. Nothing was missing, and the driver's seat was adjusted for somebody who was much taller than Julie. She was only 4'11".
Hmm. Okay, so it was backed in. you could say maybe the seat had been adjusted. Maybe somebody wasn't. Julie wasn't driving it. We might be able to say that. Is this a decent area the way you understand it? Maybe we may not know
Back
about that in
then it wasn't
2019.
so bad.
Okay.
I can't speak for what it is now,
Mm-hmm.
but then it wasn't a real bad area.
Okay. Would you say the way you understand it was the car found in an area where she said she was going shopping? Any
No,
shopping that she would have been
no.
doing anywhere near there, do you think?
No, I would guess if Julie were going to go shopping, she probably would have gone to the Volusia Mall.
Okay. Now, who found this car? Was it just some passerby or something? Did somebody, complain about it, or did the
I believe
police
the
find?
police found the car backed into that space. I believe it was the
Okay.
police department.
So this is kind of a situation where they were on the lookout for her car, being that she
Right.
was a missing
Her
person. They
car was
found it.
gone. Yeah.
Okay. Any idea the way you look at it? Was it kind of hidden or something? Do you think?
No.
Okay.
No.
I guess what I'm going to ask
In
is,
the city lot, so it was, it was visible.
okay. I guess what I'm saying is, was it prominent enough that it should have been found quicker than that, or are you under
I
the
would
impression
think
that
if they were actively looking for her, you would think so.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess what I'm saying is that it wasn't hidden to the point where it wasn't discovered for a couple weeks. I guess what I'm trying to figure out, do you think it was there that whole time, or do you think that it had just been put there like the day before?
If they put it there the day before, I'd like to know where they hid it during that time
Mm-hmm.
period. It's hard to say because, again, the police thought she may have just gone somewhere to clear
Mm-hmm.
her head.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I don't
So,
know how actively. I'm sure at this point they were starting to look,
all right.
starting to take it serious.
All right. So we're just not sure. Did they dust it for fingerprints? Did they do any forensics on it at all, to your
Yes,
knowledge?
from what I heard, they did. That's what I was told by Detective Adamy, that her car was dusted.
Okay. Now you said she was going shopping. What was found? You said it was unlocked, which seems to me a little unusual. But what was found in the car?
They didn't say, just her purse.
Just her purse. Any idea if any gifts that she was allegedly going to shop for were found in the car?
They never mentioned that, and if there were, with the car being unlocked, you would think they would have taken the gifts, but why wouldn't they have taken her purse? So
Right.
I'm doubting that there were gifts in the car.
Okay.
It seems to me they would have stolen her purse as well.
Right. Any keys? Keys for the car were found.
The keys, if I remember correctly, were in the car.
Okay, so she just dumped the car and took off, leaving it unlocked with the keys in it, or not. Um, the roommates, we've already talked about them. I know that one of their names is Michelle. I think that you've been trying to figure out what their other names are and the last name.
I remember her last name. She
Yeah.
got married. That's the problem. It's been so long. I
Yeah.
could probably find out from Detective McElvoy.
Okay. Did your brother talk to them? Did they know anything? Did they see her that day the way, they remember it?
He had spoken to them. I'm not. It's been so long. That's what's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what their conversations were. At that point, everybody was just so worried and concerned. What happened? And but I do know that he had spoken to the roommates, and I believe they kept in touch for a little while.
Okay.
I know one of them reached out to me years ago when AOL, gosh, it was probably like 1.0 back then, back in the 90s, and I don't have that account anymore. Otherwise, I'd probably be able to track her down. But, we had spoken on the phone, and there was just so few clues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the roommates, did they say that they saw her? Did she, once again, we're a little up in the air. Did she come home after work that day, or they just said they
That's what
couldn't?
I don't remember. And these girls worked too, so I don't know if they saw her or not.
Okay. Do you think that these roommates had any idea about the complaints she was having about some guy that she worked with? Did they ever mention
More
anything?
than likely. I mean, women talk. I would think that they more than likely did.
Now, my understanding is there was some sort of ATM video or surveillance video. When did you find out about that, or maybe when did your brother find out about that? What can you tell
Someone
the
had
listeners?
said during the initial investigation that she had taken some money out of her account, but I don't know about a video.
Okay.
If there was a video, they didn't say much about it, just that she had withdrawn money.
Okay, so she withdrew money, but there may be a video, there may not be a video. You don't know. Do you have any idea where the money was taken out?
No, I don't. I don't know where she banked at.
Okay. But that would make sense maybe if she was going shopping that she did stop in an ATM somewhere.
Right.
Okay.
Because back then, not a lot of places took cards.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
hard to say.
Okay. Now let's get to this guy. At least we think it's the guy. His name is Kenneth Roy. His last name is, he has, I guess, two first names. Kenneth Roy, R-O-Y is his last name. When was the first time you heard the name Kenneth Roy mentioned in the disappearance of Julie?
Probably a couple of weeks into the investigation.
Okay. Any idea? Now, keep in mind for the listeners, when Julie was complaining about a guy that was harassing her and possibly stalking her, she never mentioned a name. So I am wondering, do you have any idea how his name came up if nobody could give police his name? Any idea of that at all?
It may have been the roommates. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure. But somebody knew, somebody at work knew, somebody knew something to refer him to the police.
Okay, I understand. Okay. So his name pops up. He's not. It was a name you've never heard of before. Do you believe that your brother had ever heard that name before it popped up after her disappearance?
I don't think he had. He may
Okay.
have, I don't know.
Okay, and we know that Julie had complained about a guy, but had never used a name. Now, did she and Kenneth work together?
Yes.
All right, so he worked there, she worked there, so it's very possible that he could have been the guy that he was complaining about. Um, so how did he even become a suspect?
That's what I'm not sure of. Like I said, someone had to have given his name at some point.
Okay.
That's who was the one that was bothering Julie. Nowadays, again, use the term stalking. You know, not leaving her alone, what have you.
Okay.
It's so hard when it's been 30 years to remember every little.
I understand. I understand that, Leslie. Just do your best you can. I understand that.
I do believe his name was mentioned by someone.
Okay. I guess what I'm saying is that was there evidence that brought them to his door, or was it just somebody giving them a name? Well, I know this guy. I guess that, and we're just not sure.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Now the police did talk to him. What did he have to say?
I don't know what I can actually say, even though it's been an ancient investigation. I guess I can say what I want.
Please.
They really felt like it was him from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he was a scapegoat. He had a past.
Okay.
And I don't know how much I can say about his past. I don't know if this man could try to sue me or anything.
Well, did he have a criminal record before he and Julie met?
Yes, he did.
All right, we'll just leave it at that. So he had a criminal record, but he was working at this job, and the police were drawn to him for some reason. And to your knowledge, did he ever offer up any sort of alibi or, anything like
I don't
that
really
for that?
think he had an alibi. I've never heard that he had an alibi. Supposedly, the Detective McAvoy, for some reason, thinks that Julie went by there. I don't know if that's true, if he knows for a fact that she did go by there, or, if he was kind of giving me a hint that she may have. I don't know if he stalked her in the parking lot at work. If he caught her out in the parking lot, I don't know. I'm pretty sure she went home, so that doesn't seem possible. I do know she was supposed to have Christmas dinner with her family, and she did not, of course, make it there on the 25th. But for some reason, the police were absolutely drawn to him from the beginning. Every detective that has worked the case has felt like it was him.
Okay, so they questioned him quite a bit, but they could not connect him to the disappearance.
Yes.
Okay. Now you did say that
everything on him, to use their terminology, has been circumstantial.
Okay, circumstantial evidence. Now you did mention that there were fingerprints possibly found in the car. I guess that his fingerprints did not match any in the car. I'm guessing.
No, not to my knowledge. I believe that one of the detectives had told me it was kids and Julie, and so, he'd be smarter than to leave his prints in that car. Anybody would have been.
Okay, and what are his particulars? Was he around Julie's age at the time? Did he have any kids of himself? I mean, do you know anything if he was originally from?
A little older. I've never heard he had children. I've never heard he was married. All I know is, from what I've been told, for whatever reason, the police do know or told me he was the last person to see her alive. I don't know how they know that information, because when I was given that, they weren't giving out a whole lot, because by then, of course, they were taking everything serious.
Right.
A lot more serious than they did during the initial investigation.
Okay.
Al McAvoy has told me a few things. He's a retired police commissioner from New York, and he comes in a day or two a week to work the cold cases. He's told me a little bit, but because they still call it open, which to me technically it's not, I guess they can't give everything out.
Okay.
I believe they had like 79 unsolved murder cases a year or two ago that he was working on there.
Yeah, that's horrible too. I guess what we're saying is this disappearance is going to be 31 years old coming this December, and there's never been any hard evidence to really connect Kenneth Roy to Julie's disappearance. Doesn't sound like a very good guy, but I don't personally know him. He may be the guy that was, and he may be the guy that was harassing her at work, but she never used his name.
Right, that it could be someone else. But for some reason, there's been quite a few detectives in this case through the years. They have all said the same thing. When they get the files out and they go through them and they go through the investigation, that they all know without a doubt that he had something to do with her disappearance.
Okay, that's what the police are saying. That's not me saying it. That's not you saying it. This is what the police have said since you've been living with this for the last 30 years. That's the police saying this.
Right.
Okay. There is something, and it reminded me, I can't think of the case right now of, man, I think he's known as the dating game killer. He was a guy who appeared on the dating game, and then he ended up being a serial killer. But he had a picture of all these different women in his place. But you told me when they went to Ken's house, he also had kind of a photo album, and possibly Julie was in it. Why don't you tell the listeners about that?
Yeah, there was supposed to be a pictures of women in this photo album. I have never seen it. Hoping that in the near future I can get to Daytona and go talk to McAvoy and look at some of this stuff. But that where Julie was in this picture, and she was in kind of a contorted position that people wouldn't normally be in, and holding a cigarette. Julie didn't smoke. So it looked like, from what one of the detectives told me, that it was a staged photograph.
Are you saying that this maybe looked like it was a staged photograph?
Correct. That's what one of the detectives had said to me.
Okay.
Just simply because of the way that her body was positioned.
Huh. Any of the other women ever identified, to your knowledge, in this photo album that Kenneth Roy had?
I have no idea. That's a good question.
No. Okay. And has anybody in your family ever seen this photo album? You just said you haven't seen it, but the police have seen it, obviously. Had your brother ever seen it? Anybody
I
else?
believe my brother and my mom did.
Okay. Huh. All right. And she has a cigarette in her mouth, and you even said
they had it in her hand.
In her hand. And you made it sound to me, if you can say, that it almost was like under the impression that maybe it looked like she wasn't even possibly alive in the picture.
Correct.
Okay. Do you believe that this album is still in police possession 30 years later?
I would assume it is.
Okay.
I would assume it is.
Okay. And once again, they have never told you whether they've been able to track down any of the other women who are in this photo album.
They have not.
Okay. What you know about Kenneth Roy? Did he live in the area? I mean, where is he from? Where did he live? Did he live in Daytona Beach? Did he live in Orlando?
He was from somewhere up north, and his home was actually on Tula Drive in Port Orange.
Okay, so would you say that was near where her car was found or not?
Not too far away. It's just a little bit of a drive, but not too far away.
All right, so it's not a distance that he could have walked. Once again, if he ditched the car, could he have walked it?
He'd be walking a little ways, but his home, too, had a great big tree in the front, which doesn't really block the home, but it kind of does the top of the home, and the home set back from the driveway a bit.
Okay. Do you know if any of the other once you got into this, once your brother was looking into this, and we have to talk about Julie, her own family here, before this is all over as well, but do you know if any other women who worked at this company ever complained about, if he ever gave them a hard time too, harassing them, anything? Do you any knowledge of that?
If there were any other women, the police never said. Based on his prior history, he seemed to be more interested in small, petite, dark-haired, dark-eyed women.
Okay. So you're saying he had a type,
a preference.
Preference, and that this could maybe they developed this profile of him from some of his prior incidents.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. Now you told me that he this is a bit of hearsay, but I think that we're going to put it out there anyway, that he talked to somebody about a body. What was this story?
The story is he was in a bar somewhere in Daytona, and I believe this person called this tip in and said something about, do you know you can get rid of a body if you use lime?
Mm-hmm. Remember when this call came in, and do you think that this person, if it was the bartender,
Fairly early on in the investigation.
very early, do you think the person that called this in already knew that Kenneth was a suspect, a person of interest in Julie's disappearance, or did this just come out of the blue?
I don't know if it came out of the blue or not. I have no idea. I don't think the guy had a lot of friends.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I'm saying is I'm more inclined to believe that comment if, just me personally, if the person calling in did not already know that Kenneth was being investigated for Julie's disappearance. That would lend a credibility to it.
They may have.
However, if on the other hand, the person already knew that Ken was being investigated, then it's almost a little bit it feels a little contrived to me. Somebody just making something up to trying to help the police pin it on them. Okay, but we're not sure about that, are we?
Right, and you get so much hearsay in these missing persons cases.
Yeah, that's true, and of course, you know that a lot concerning Donnie's case as well. Case, of course, that you've already been on Found about. All right,
you don't know who's covering for who or who's making up stories to take the heat off someone else, so you just don't know.
Right. Let's talk about this a little bit. Could you see a scenario, as much as Julie complained about this guy, once again, we don't know it was Ken. We can infer that it was Ken, but being that she never mentioned his name. Can you see a scenario where Julie actually would have gone over to his house? Can you visualize that?
I could see maybe Julie, because she might have been this way, thinking, this guy's just pathetic. I feel sorry for him. I'm going to go over there and be nice and tell him, listen, I'm thinking about getting back with Tim, or telling him I'm just not ready to date somebody. I like you as a friend. I can see her handling a situation that way.
Mm-hmm. And
perhaps he got mad and...
Mm-hmm. Well, we're not going to get into that, but we just want to say you could see a scenario, even though she might have complaining about somebody who was allegedly Ken,
trying to handle it nicely.
That if he invited her over to his house, that she might have shown up.
Right.
Okay. But I'm guessing that nobody's ever come forward to say that they saw her car there or anything like that.
That's one that I had left a message for Detective McAvoy, and I'm hoping he gets back with me soon, asking him that, did any of the neighbors see her car?
Okay. That'd be an interesting question. You'd think that would, be a helpful piece of information.
Anybody could pull a car in a garage and then take it out.
Sure.
Later on down, a day or two later, and put it somewhere else and then go back and move it. Who knows? Sure. I have heard so much in the last 2 years about vehicles being hidden and moved and bodies being hidden and moved that I don't doubt anything.
Okay. Have you or anybody in your family, maybe especially your brother, ever talked to Ken one-on-one? I'm not going to say confront him, but have ever had a opportunity to talk to him about Julie?
No, my brother never did confront him.
Okay.
Or anyone that I know of in the family or Julie's family talked to him face to face. That probably wouldn't have been too good of an idea in the beginning there.
Okay. But not in the last 30 years either. Just kind of popped in.
He doesn't live in Daytona anymore anyway. He moved a year or two after that.
Okay, and maybe that's a good question to ask you right now. Has anybody kept tabs on him and to see, what has Kenneth Roy done with his life since 1988? Do you know?
I've been told he's been kept tabs on.
Okay.
I've looked him up myself.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like he owns a home, that he started some kind of a business.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Looks like he's been in some trouble since then, not anything to land him in prison, but more criminal type behavior.
Okay. Any felonies on his record? Violent felonies since 1988? Once again, I'm sure listeners are going to look this up anyway, but I'm asking you. But
Not since 88 that I know of, that I've been able to find. Prior to 88, he had a felony. He served time in prison for it,
okay.
and that involved, toward a woman.
Okay. And like I said, do you know where he's originally from? Do you think he's originally from Florida or some other state?
No, he's not originally from Florida. Don't quote me on this. It's somewhere up north. I want to say I heard Maine. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about Julie's family. How did they react to all of this? What part did they play in this? Did your brother get to talk to them? What was their
Yeah,
response?
he
If you can say.
in the beginning, he talked to them quite a bit. Of course, he was in Orlando, and I believe they lived in Astor, Florida at the time. So it wasn't like I'm sure they talked on the phone quite frequently, and when he went down there, about Julie's case. But Julie was actually adopted
Mm-hmm.
out of an orphanage when she was, I believe she was around 2 or 3 years old,
Hmm.
and moved to the States with her American family, and they had raised Julie all those years.
Mm-hmm. And so did she have brothers and sisters?
She had a sister and some brothers that she did.
Okay. And would you say that they've, obviously we're just talking about your family, but have they played an active role in trying to figure out what happened as well?
I believe so. I know that her brother told me that, he said it was back during a time period when elections were getting ready to go on within Daytona, and they got called down to the mayor's office and were told that they were going to open up these cold cases and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said then nothing ever really came from it. My brother has remarried a wonderful lady, and they've had 3 children of their own. So he's got a family now that, let's see, there's 3 girls and 3 boys,
Mm-hmm.
and including his and Julie's too.
Wow.
So 30 years. You move on, but you always wonder. My mom diligently worked Julie's case for many, many years, and worked with Fran Webb, who has a missing daughter in Daytona. It's Darlene Webb. She's been gone a little longer than Julie.
Right. I looked her up.
Mom
Sure.
passed away in 2006, and now with the internet being what it is, I try to keep Julie out there on the missing people sites, and have you like I try with Donnie.
If the police were to get any new information, I'm going to take for granted, do you think that they would go to her, not necessarily her family first?
I don't know. I mean, I would hope they would let us all know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Just,
When everybody's gotten older, I know her mom just recently had a surgery. It's so many years. It's just the thing that's so hard is, and I use this in talking about my stepson the other day, ambiguous grief. I don't like to use the word closure because I don't see how you get closure when a loved one dies. I've lost both of my parents, and while I've accepted that, of course, it's still, you think of them every day. To me, that's not closure. I don't know. Maybe I have it all wrong. but it would certainly. Julie was a real person.
Mm-hmm.
She existed on this earth. She had children. She was a mom, a sister, a wife at one time, a daughter. We all loved her, and it would be just a blessing to be able to put her to rest and give her peace.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Do you have a Facebook page, or does her family have a Facebook page or something set up for her
I started
disappearance?
a Facebook page for Julie. It's called Find Julie Braswell Seay, Seay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And would you say that you, when was the last time you spoke to somebody in Julie's family? I guess it would be about Julie. When was the last time you ever talked to them about
We're
everything
on
that's going
staff
on?
together. So I speak with them, or if I have a question, I'm able to message them and ask questions. One of the things I've been trying to do is get Crime Stoppers to work with us some. Allegedly, this guy that they suspect, Ken Roy, was somewhat of a loner, but there had to be someone out there. I mean, he worked and what have you,
Mm.
that could give us some kind of information that I doubt seriously that he actually confided in somebody, but when someone's missing, you'll take any little tip you can get. Just
Of course.
any little
Of
tip.
course.
Maybe it's what kind of habits did he have? What kind of remarks did he make about women? Did he ever say anything? Julie was Korean,
Mm-hmm.
real pretty, real tiny, real petite. Did he make a remark to somebody about the kind of women he preferred? So I really want to get Crime Stoppers to do something for us in Volusia County and see if they can perhaps, do some flyers, get a billboard up, something.
Right. And I just want to reiterate something, that this was the police who brought up Ken Roy's name. This is not you, or, we're not, this isn't
This
some
was
wild goose chase or, going after somebody. This is a
no,
person that has come out of the detective's mouth. His name came out of the detective's mouth very early on in the investigation.
right, and his name had come up in the paper too.
Okay.
They were very adamant.
Mm-hmm. And if I can ask, and I would not ask you to say any other names, but in the last 30 years, have the police ever mentioned anybody else or any other possibility regarding Julie's disappearance?
No,
None.
and
Okay.
none of the serial killers then fit the time frame.
Okay. For Daytona Beach. All right. Anything else you'd like to say, Leslie, before we complete this interview?
If anyone knows anything that can help us, please let us know. I have emailed coroners and talked to different coroners and had people send me information about Jane Doe's, and if there's anyone that knows of anyone sitting in a morgue unidentified for years or that was buried by a morgue, to please call Detective McAvoy at Daytona Beach Police Department.
Okay. All right, Leslie, I would say on one hand, it's nice to have you back on the program, but on the other hand, I guess it's not so nice given what we talk about and the circumstances and everything. But I appreciate you being on the program again and introducing all the listeners to your sister-in-law, Julie Seay. And I appreciate you being on.
It's really hard. 30
Yeah.
years is really hard. And then we went through it again about
Mhm.
17, 18 years ago. They excavated the concrete floor at this person's house.
Oh, I didn't
The
know that.
FBI,
All right, I
yeah,
don't know
the
if we ever
FBI
talked
and
about that. Okay.
the FBI and police did. They used some kind of radar devices and search dogs in that home, but they didn't find anything. And that was actually the third time between 97 and 2001 that they searched that home.
And nothing. Nothing. Okay. See, I didn't know that. If the listeners were wondering, I don't know if that ever came up in any of the conversations we talked about, but we
Right.
had. But they did then search the house a few times, and in fact, even so far as digging up part of the house.
Right, because he was supposed to have poured fresh concrete in that
Mm,
garage at one point,
okay.
and it was fairly new. And they had received a tip that I don't
Mm.
know from where or who, but that she might be buried under the garage.
Huh.
Could have been a neighbor that saw him putting the concrete in, or whatever. I
I have
don't
to ask
know.
this. I have to ask this. How did Ken Roy? How was he handled, or how did he handle being a suspect? Because the reason I ask is because some suspects, when they are confronted by police, they of course they claim they have nothing to do with it. Of course, then others say, "Well, go ahead, try to prove it." Some are very nice, some are very arrogant. Did you ever get an idea from police how Ken Roy reacted when he would be questioned or when his house was searched?
I don't think he was a charmer based on the little bit that's been said.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think he had kind of an arrogant attitude, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to find anything on me, sort of attitude.
Okay. He did. I'm just wondering if he was overtly like, no, I didn't have anything to do with this, or because some
Well, some people I would
suspects are
imagine
not like
would
that.
be indignant, yeah.
Yeah,
Where
I'm
he was more try. That's how I understand it. Be like, try it. You're not going to find anything.
okay because I can remember. I think it was the Rosemary Rapp case where when the police brought her husband in to question him about her disappearance, he said something like, "You know what, guys, I'm way smarter than any of you, and so you're never going to pin anything on me." That was something. It was something like that
That's
this guy said.
Yeah, that's basically what I've been told about this person. Is that he has that attitude that he's way more clever, and I've been told he's pretty clever.
Okay.
So,
Well, hopefully one of these days somebody will be more clever than he is. Maybe it's some listeners of Unfound that they can figure this all out, and hopefully we can, if he is the guy who did this, and we just don't know. I think that when you have some facts that we don't have a lot of facts in this case. There's a lot of wiggle room for a lot of different possibilities, unfortunately.
right.
That there's probably a few different things that could have happened to her, and it wouldn't necessarily have involved Kenneth Roy. But if the police want to say that he's the number one suspect, who am I to argue? So,
There's always that chance it could have
mm-hmm.
been someone or something else, but they're pretty adamant that that's who they felt like did something.
Yeah.
And every time you get a phone call, or through the years, or I can't count the times my mom called me, they found a body. I just wanted to give you a warning. Don't
Mm-hmm.
get upset. And then it wouldn't be Julie. There's I can't remember the exact count, but there's quite a few girls from a certain time period in Daytona. There was another girl, Denise Dansby, that car was found backed into or pulled into a hotel parking lot. They did find Denise's body, but they have never found her, or they found her remains. They never found the murderer. And that case is kind of similar
Mm-hmm.
to Julie's. And there was
Yeah.
another girl, I can't remember her name right off the top of my head, that struck me as similar too. These just poof, vanished without a trace kind of
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah, listeners should know that I did look up Daytona Beach in those that time frame, a few years before, a few years after. Darlene Webb was, of course, even longer before that. I think it was 1983 when she disappeared.
Right, about 5
So
years early.
I don't really see a lot of similarities. I'm going to guess my opinion, in looking at the NamUs list of women who disappeared in Daytona Beach, but NamUs does not have every missing person on its list, so there
Right.
could
I
be other
thought
missing
a
women.
lot of the girls on her page, her Facebook page, back when I first started the page, so you'd have to scroll down quite a ways, but I
Mhm.
did list all the women that were missing during that time period and the dates. And the one girl had a really, want to say it was a German type sounding last name,
Oh
Holenschitz
yes,
or
yes, I saw her name too. Yes, yeah, that's one of the
right.
ones. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, that I don't know. They're just kind of
Mm.
odd. The Denise Dancy one with the car, that always struck me as kind of strange. And then there was
Mm.
I can't remember which other girl it was that I thought possibly could have been killed by the same person.
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, I looked into it. Really, my opinion, nothing really jumped out at me. Once again, just looking at the NamUs list. But there
Mhm.
could be other missing women in Daytona Beach who are not on in the list. In fact, just last week on Unfound, we covered a woman's disappearance who's not on NamUs at all. So there could be women in Daytona Beach who disappeared 86, 87, 88, 89, similar circumstances, and they wouldn't be able to be found easily, their names to be found anywhere because they're not on that list.
And
So,
two, you have to remember when you're in an area like Daytona, so many people go there. The 70s and 80s, a lot of
mm-hmm,
people
mm-hmm,
gravitated to Florida from different places, and when you start looking for somebody that's missing, it's unbelievable the unidentified people
sure.
that
Oh,
have
yeah.
that have never, you're thinking they're not on NamUs, but they'll be in a Jane Doe website or something,
Mm-hmm.
and no one's looking for them.
Yeah,
It
I
just it
know.
doesn't
I
make
know.
sense.
I know. Yeah, the unidentified remains list on NamUs and elsewhere it's startling as well. It is.
Right.
Right. Okay, Leslie, it's great having you back on the program. I think we had a very all-encompassing conversation about Julie, but about maybe some possibilities that her disappearance could be connected to others. I'm sure the unfound listeners will look into that themselves. But
That would be awesome. And if
um,
anybody finds out anything, please turn it in to Detective Al McAvoy, Daytona Beach Police Department.
Leslie, thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much for doing another one for us.
You're very welcome. And that was my interview with Leslie Martin, sister-in-law of Julie Seay. I thank her for joining all of us once again on Unfound. And if you missed her previous interview, please find the Donnie Martin episode on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, or elsewhere. To start this summation, it's hard not to suspect Ken Roy for Julie's disappearance. As I posted in the discussion group on Facebook and elsewhere, he had a long list of violent felonies before and after Julie disappeared. They worked together, and it seems the police got focused on him very quickly. Frankly, much more quickly than other police departments have acted, and many other cases Unfound is covered. What's unclear to me, though, and I got the feeling it's unclear to Leslie as well, is how the police found out about Ken in the first place. Did coworkers see how Ken stalked Julie and alerted police after her disappearance? Did possibly another coworker get the same treatment from Ken and alert police? Did police start looking through the criminal records of Julie's coworkers and found Ken and thought him to be the most likely suspect? We really have no idea. Because to remind you again, Julie never mentioned the name of her harasser to anyone. And to put a finer point on this, with Julie never mentioning Ken, it leaves open the possibility that somebody else did cause her disappearance. Or she might have just run off on her own. Before you think I'm off on that, look at it this way, and I'm sure the investigators had these points in their minds back at the time, despite also looking at Ken. Julie was recently divorced. She didn't have custody of her children. It's the holidays, and it doesn't seem like she would get to see her children until after Christmas. And many people get more depressed than usual around the holidays. What I'm saying is police could have looked at that information, along with the fact that she never named the guy who was harassing her, and at least at the time, law enforcement might have thought, could she just be depressed and having some mental episode and just making this stalker up? Hey, we all know how non-seriously the police take disappearances, especially if the missing person shows any signs of depression or mental illness. Yet, I also have to give law enforcement credit. They went to Ken's house. They dug up the garage eventually. They at least spoke to him about Julie's disappearance. However, they would have had more ammunition in those discussions if Julie had come out and named Ken as her stalker in the conversation she had with the people she trusted the most. Then there would be no question who she was talking about. Instead, 31 years later, his harassment of Julie is somewhat hearsay. And yes, I believe that's how meticulous investigators have to be with situations like this. I realize to almost all of you, there is no mystery as to what happened to Julie and who did it. But then I got to say in response, then it's a mystery to me that if Ken is exactly like he was portrayed, why isn't he connected to more women's disappearances? Or maybe he is. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Dentzel, and you've been listening to Unfound.